Hello, I'm Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and in this short video I'm going to have a quick discussion and show some examples of use of the new Laowa 15mm shift lens. I've got a lengthy review as well with lots more detailed photos and examples, which is linked from this video, but this is just a quick overview and also shows some aspects of how you actually use a tilt and shift lens. Now, for a start, I should mention, if you're new to tilt and shift lenses, I've got loads of articles about how to use them. This is shift only, and they're on the website. I've got a few videos as well, and also I've just published a book about how to use tilt and shift lenses. But anyway, advert out of the way, let's get on with looking at the lens. The 15mm here in the EF mount version, it's available in Nikon F mount, Sony mount. They will be available in due course. The initial ones are just Nikon F and Canon EF. So if I just take it off, this is my Canon 5DS, which I've used for some of the sample photos. I've also used a Canon EOS RP, the one I'm shooting this on, for some of these shots, testing with this, with an EF to RF adapter. Now the lens itself, and I've got lots of examples in the review of more detail, and you can see on this video, is fully manual. There's no electronics with it. That means that as far as the camera is concerned, there is no lens present. That's not a problem. I'm using an old Olympus OM lens for filming this, just a different way of working. The lens itself, nice solid build. It's metal, has a very good lens cap that clicks on, and the reason you have a very good lens cap is because you've got this lump of glass sticking out the front. Now in a bit I'm going to have a look at the Canon TS-E17 in comparison with this as well, but this is mainly about the 15mm. And this large lump of glass on the front is really to give you the wide angle coverage, because although, nice good click there, although the lens is 15mm, when it's shifted you're getting bits of the field of view of the equivalent of around about 9mm, which is extremely wide. Anyway, shift, the key bit about this lens, and this is a novel shift mechanism. There's an indicator on the front here that tells you how much shift, and as I turn this ring, the mount shifts backwards and forwards. Now this is actually a rather nice design. I've not seen this anywhere else before. And it lets you set shift. Of course, you might not want to do shift just up and down, rise or fall as it's sometimes called. You might want to do shift left or right, or even on diagonals. And I've got examples of why you might choose to use those different settings in a bit. But you change that, you press this tab on the side, and the lens mount moves around in 15-degree steps. There's a soft movement, you can set it between that, but there are click stops at 15 degrees. It's very useful when you're using diagonal shift. The lens itself, as I say, its manual focus goes from F4.5 up to F22. There are soft click stops, which you can just hear there. They're not rigid. You can use part stops. And the focus throw is rather nice. It's from about there to about there. It's actually much better than any of the Canon TS-E tilt shift lenses, which the modern versions tend to have the distance scale rather close. Now that may be fine for autofocus lenses, but these lenses, the Canon ones as well, are not autofocus, so it helps to have a nice smooth aperture motion. But anyway, let's have a look at a few examples of how I use the lens. We'll start off with just a few simple movements. Up down is the first one, then we'll move to left right, panning the camera, and diagonal shift. Now I've got lots of examples of this on the review as well, but in case anyone was wondering about quality of the lens, this picture, A2, is from a 26 megapixel EOS RP picture. It is fine enough quality that I would happily submit this to one of my architectural photography clients. It works great. Now there are some minor issues, which I discuss in the full review, that you need to take care of. But that's a shifted view, and I'll mention this a bit in some video shots. We have a stitched image, a left-right stitch between two shots taken with diagonal shift. Now that is extremely wide angle. That's probably equivalent to part of an image, as I say, of a 9mm lens cropped out to this narrow. But anyway, let's on with some examples. Here's a view of the Vijay Patel building at De Montfort University near my home. I'm just going to show basic downward shift here, followed by shifting the lens upwards. This shows how, with the camera stationary, you'll notice that the vertical lines of the building are not leaning inwards or outwards. That's one of the main uses for shift. Here's the actual photo taken, obviously a different aspect ratio. And you can see in this one as well the star spike from the reflection. Now the lens has a 5-blade aperture and gives very prominent star spikes on bright sources of light for anything other than fully wide open. This is shot probably around about f10, f11. I say probably because as a fully manual lens it has no EXIF data. Now moving around, I can see a look at the building, and this is a single point perspective because I'm facing flat onto the building. It gives quite a distinctly odd look to it. It's perfectly accurate because the lens has very little distortion. It is, however, a rectilinear lens, so this is what you'd expect. If I move on now to a view of a bridge near my home, this is over the River Soar going into Leicester, and you can see I've used once again a bit of vertical shift to save getting the towpath from where I'm standing into the shot and expand it upwards. The typical look you get of a wide-angle lens. This is not due to the shift or anything, it's just because it's a very wide-angle lens. I'm now looking at the VJP building again, and I'm going to show the effect of shifting sideways. As you can see, that was a shift to the left and centre the lens again, and I'll now shift over to the right. Now notice the extreme look of the people walking past. You'd expect that with a very wide lens anyway. It's just something you get with it. Now I'll move it back again, and there we go. We're now pointing at the entranceway. I'm now going to move the camera and pan it and shift at the same time. So there we go, that's panning. And I now shift back, and with more shift and panning, you can see the perspective is very different. And if we go back again, shift that way, you can see how the combination of shift and panning gives you a distinctly different perspective view. All effects of just a very wide lens. Now this is inside that building. The lens is mounted on the EOS RP and shifted upwards, and you can see on the screen on the back there. Now I'm using focus peaking, so they're the red marks that you can see, and that enables me to focus quite readily using the manual focus lens. Obviously this phone is focusing itself, and here's the actual image I took. Once again, as a still, different aspect ratio, but it gives you a feeling for a vertically shifted image. I've moved around, and now I'm looking up the staircase, and you can see the result, just normal bit of shift up and down, and I can change the view. But if I pan round, I move the stairs off to the side, get a nice view of all the staircases, but notice how the stairs themselves are tilted. Now if somebody was coming down those stairs, they'd be leaning. Now the same view, I'm looking the camera directly up the stairs, and I'm shifting diagonally. Now the perspective of the picture is changed, but notice how the steps are now level, and anyone coming down those steps would also be level. And that goes back to the original point of view where the camera is pointing. Now going outside, got some examples of diagonal shift here, combination of diagonal shift and panning. These are similar to the left-right shift examples earlier, but obviously the vertical component of the diagonal shift is enabling me to get more of the building in. So you can see where we're pointing. Diagonally down, we move round, shift up diagonally across to the right, and you can see how big the right-hand side of the building now looks in comparison to the left-hand side. This is because we're not actually pointing the camera directly towards the entrance, and by a combination of shift and panning you can change the relative proportions of the building. We go back, and there we go, we're now pointing towards the entrance, and you can see the relative proportions has changed again. Now if I add a bit more panning round and finish off with just a bit of rise, vertical shift, that's how the building actually looks from where I'm standing. Diagonal shift is very useful for individual shots, where in this example the camera is actually looking down the covered walkway beside the building, although the diagonal shift means that most of the image is offset from that. The vertical element of the diagonal shift has given me no converging verticals, so no straight lines, and because I'm looking straight on at the view, the horizontal lines are unaffected as well. Now you can take pictures, multiple pictures like this, and stitch them together if you like. So this one is two photos shifted up, shifted down, and then stitched together to give this square composition. You can stitch left-right shifts, or in this instance you can shift diagonally to the left, diagonally up to the right, stitch the two together and give you a really wide view. This is the example that I showed in the print earlier. I hope that's given a few examples of how you'd actually use such a lens. It doesn't need tilt really at this wide. There are uses of tilt obviously, but for most people the fact that this is well under half the price of this, the Canon version, and this is 17mm. Now I've got some examples showing the difference in field of view at full shift between this, the 17mm, and the 15mm. Now you'd expect 15mm to have wider coverage, and it does. However, this lens shifts more than this one. So, an example photo. Now, as you can see, I've got two photos side by side, taken without moving the camera, just swapping the lens over. The 17mm lens has the slightly smaller field of view. However, it has more shift. It has 12mm of shift compared with 11mm for the 15. But you can see the difference with the 15 with its wider view, and even with slightly reduced shift, it has a wider coverage. So coming back to this, yes, I use this lens all the time for my architectural photography work. I've had it for years. It's great. However, it is well over twice the price of the Laowa, and the Laowa is nowhere near only half as good. It's really rather nice. There are a few issues. I would say absolute corner sharpness, 17 probably takes it. But is it that much of a difference? Well, have a look at some of the examples and see if it matters to you. There you've got it. Now, there's the 15mm. Hopefully this has been of some interest and some use. If you'd like to know more, I've written lots of articles, and of course can't go away without a mention of my book. So, thank you.